Cooper Show.
Yeah, I believe in you. I don't believe in lucky sevens. I'm not sure about Loch Ness, but I know I believe in angels. I believe in happiness.
Hello, hello. I hope that everybody has happiness in the new year. Believe me, it has been a couple of years, hasn't it? And I'm expecting some upturn. I'm expecting the stock market to come back. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Some great things that are in our future. So happy New Year. This is the second show of the 7th season, and I would not be here without any viewers. So thank you to you so very, very much. Now let's talk about the sponsor, because that's something that's so wonderful to have someone believe in you. And we have had None hydration and energy tablets, hydration tablets, vitamin tablets. They have so many wonderful products at None. Let me turn it so you can see it. And I started off with the energy tablets because, of course, it's the Caffeinated Cooper Show. So I do like to find those naturally sourced, good organic caffeine products that taste good and are very effective. And this is absolutely a product just like that. But look at this. Let me show you the back of the box. It is immunity. So this is a full pack of immunity products. You can go to None Life, which is NUUNLIFE.com, and look at all of their immunity products. I mean, we've heard about so many people getting sick. We've got the flu, we have COVID, we have all these little wintertime things that are floating around and making people ill. So why not boost your immune system with None Immunity? And if you go onto their website right now, this expires January 9th. You get 25% off with the code NUNSPORT25. So that's NUUNSPORT25 for 25% off. And if you subscribe to what you're purchasing, you get another 15% off of those products. So it's a great time to go over to the website. But if you don't shop online, or for whatever reason you don't buy it on the website and take advantage of that great deal, you can find them at Publix, Walmart, Kroger, Walgreens, and Amazon, and many other stores as they have been expanding. So there is 20 milligrams of ginseng, a blend of vitamin B12, B6, and caffeine sourced from green tea. These tablets are vegan, gluten-free. They're great for your gym bag. They're great for your back pocket. They're great for anywhere on the go. There's only 3 grams of carbs. So really low on your sugar. I just love it. 80 milligrams of caffeine in one little tablet. Why not? Give it a try. All right, everybody. I have a great guest connected with me. He is from Los Angeles, and he has had his hands in so many projects we can't even talk about, but he has been a part of many, many of them. Scott C. Brown is director, producer from Los Angeles, who has produced a variety of film and television projects. Most recently, he has worked on Temecula Uncorked, a documentary on the history and legacy of Temecula's wine country. The film is currently in post-production and set for release in 2023. In the film, Brown takes viewers into the world of winemakers and the unique issues facing them as the state's 10-year drought continues to impact them adversely. He is also working on a new comedy project titled Z.I.R, Zombies in Recovery, along with the Claymation projects Split and The Adventures of Belly Bean, where he takes viewers back into an art form that made Gumby and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer famous, but is generally no longer practiced thanks to computers' CGI technology, right? I love claymation. I mean, even beyond Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, unless it was, and I'm going to ask Scott about this, the Firemeister and all of them, were they in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? Maybe they were. Having written a number of other films and television series episodes, Brown has also founded Maxit Magazine, a dedicated to independent filmmakers who are at the heart of today's film industry. The magazine is a source for indie filmmakers who want to connect with one another, as well as investors, producers, and other industry professionals. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Scott C. Brown. Scott, how are you this evening?
I am alive, which is a good starting point.
That is a very good starting point. I really enjoy
most recent series.
I enjoy when you're alive. It helps to answer the question so much more.
Goes a little smoother on this side.
It does. So, of course, reading your intro, there's so many questions that come to mind, but I want to go straight to the claymation. I know that I can't because I need to hold off on that for a second, but do help me answer that one question. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, is that the one with the Firemeister and
yes.
It is.
Yeah, it had a wide variety of characters in it, but claymation actually goes back to black and white even. But the guy that broke it out really to a large scale was Ray Harryhausen. But yeah, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and that are some of the best known and still continually played every holiday season. And it was in the style of something that you could actually feel, but it was an extremely labor-intensive process. And so when CGI and that began taking over, or even hand illustration, it faded out, but it was brought back in different ways, including Nightmare on Elm Street, Wallace and Gromit, and that. So it's quite a undertaking.
There was another one. What was the film that had oh my goodness, I can see him and I can't think of his name. Better Off Dead. What's his name? Huge star.
I can't think of the one you're thinking of, but there's everything from Coraline to, and the best known is Nightmare on Elm Street. Not Nightmare on Elm Street. The Nightmare Before Christmas was the best known in the last while. But Wallace and Gromit, there's a whole series of those. Believe it or not, they're now coming back and a lot more in the commercial industry for merchandising. So it's being used a lot more. There's a whole series of them right now for Aqua Fresca, for a lot of different food commercials and things like that. And it was kind of a niche aspect, but now it's going mainstream again, which is quite interesting in its own regard.
And is it still performed and captured and created all the same that it was?
The technology has changed massively in that regard, because before it was shot on film, one frame at a time. Now we use DSLR cameras and things like that. The one I did just as a prototype for our Kickstarter, because I did not even have a DSLR camera when I first shot this thing. I had $250,000 in film production equipment, but I didn't even have a basic DSLR. So I had to use a webcam, which didn't hold focus. So it was an automatic focus. So and the clip that you have is actually over 500 frames individually moved and that. So, and what's funny is MJ Lolo, who does the voice for Belly Bean, actually, that was her audition tape, and I loved it so much, I actually sent it. I used it as for the Kickstarter campaign we did.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so let me cue up Belly Bean. Tell me about the idea. Where did the idea come from?
Well, believe it or not, it actually was going to be a children's book. And it was inspired by my daughter, who I hadn't seen for a long time because of divorce issues, things like that. So I needed something to inspire myself. So I went down to Michael's and picked up some clay, and it's a plastina clay. And I was just going to make this little guy to sit on my desk. And then my wife was like, oh, hey, you know what? That's pretty cute. So I decided to animate him a little bit just to, for a little thing. And then it kind of caught on. And so he was joined by our dog. This is Logan. And a series of other characters, actually, that are in various stages of construction, you might say.
All right.
But yeah, it's I'll let you show the
This is Belly Bean.
Hi guys, this is Bartholomew Tiberius Beanstalk. Well, you can call me Belly Bean. Yeah, I like that. Anyway, I'm starting to do a cartoon called The Adventures of Belly Bean. I know it sounds kind of egotistical. Yeah, it's about me. But as you can see, I never tie my left shoestring. I just, hopefully don't fall on my face. Which I do actually because I'm kind of fat. Anyway, hope you tune into my cartoon because it's gonna be awesome. Awesome. And the other thing, I sing. Getting to know you, getting to know all about you. Or can't touch this, can't touch this. Okay, see ya.
That is really cool. So do you do voices there in the singing?
Actually, that's all MJ Lolo. But what's interesting about that is what in the industry you would call a sizzle reel. That's not something you would usually publicly release, but several people saw it. I was just getting a thought, some feedback, and they said, you've got to put this out. So I was like, really? That's quality. They're like, no, that's what makes claymation so amazing is that it's not perfect. Unlike animation, everything is perfect. Everything is fluid. Claymation, you're looking for those thumbprints on the clay of the artists that handled them. You're looking for those little oddities and those little idiosyncrasies that actually make the character come alive in a way that animation doesn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And they almost, they're not alive, but they have a life of their own in its styling. And based on the artist that does it, you can tell in general who actually worked on this project or that project just by the styling and the motion and the movements.
So interesting. If you stop and you think about that, yeah, of course. I mean, you're in this industry, everything about claymation, but just to say that to me, someone, I've never done anything like that. Don't know, except for you, Scott. Don't know anybody that ever has. Wow. Yeah. If you think back, I mean, when I was a kid, it was Gumby.
Right.
And Gumby seemed to be
Gumby and Pokey.
Yeah. Now, they were entering a world where hand-drawn was really the primary.
Walt Disney. Yeah, they went head-to-head with Walt Disney.
They sure did. And, Gumby has a completely different look from, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And how interesting. Now tell us about Split. Split is another claymation project that you're working on?
Yeah, it is unlike Belly Bean, which is for children. Split is definitely for adults. It's about two business owners starting up new businesses, and they're forced to share a space. And they're splitting part of the resources of that space. And one is a pet mortuary and crematorium, and the other is a pizzeria. So
I want to see this.
Just imagine what part they're sharing. So yeah, it's not until they get all set up that they figure out that the oven is the crucial piece. Yeah, so just all the antics that happen. And I'm designing it around a film festival format to be shopped at the film festivals and that, rather than traditional distribution.
Okay.
Which a lot of people don't understand the difference between a film festival project and a traditional distribution project, and how massively different they are, and how you need to design them and develop them differently as well. I mean, one can work into the other, but it's, if you're looking for film festival attention, then you need to target certain things. If you're looking for traditional distribution, then you need to target other things. You can get away with, in a film festival, you can get away with a lot of unknown casts, things like that. Very artistic, divergent storylines, things like that. With traditional scripts, you need to be more along the lines of traditional talent, recognizable compounded names, B, C. Everybody goes after A-list. I don't even bother with that, because if you get an A-list talent attached to your project, you can walk into pretty much any studio and sell it to them right then.
Mm-hmm.
I compile B, C list talent that in volume, and that's how you get distribution in a more traditional or indie scale that can leverage up into a studio acquisition. And everybody focuses on studio acquisitions, but there's more indie content out there than studio by far. And there's a lot more demand for it. It's not the $100 million payday that everybody thinks. And I've made a very good living out of writing for the past 30 years. And 20 in the, actually over 25 now. I'm getting old. Over 25 in the industry, starting out as a ghost and everything else. But I didn't understand the difference for a long time between traditional distribution and film festival formats. And those are crucial to an understanding of what you're writing, what you're producing, what you're developing, and what you want to do with it. Do you want attention for your projects in general? Then you produce a film festival project. It can be shorter, it can be targeted. If you want traditional distribution for a cash return for your investors, then you have to develop it secondary to the actual artistic aspect. There's a way to, with a traditional distribution aspect, you can have some artistic aspect to it, but you better have the beats, you better have a solid storyline that can carry, plus the captive audience base. Whereas with an art house piece, you can infer a lot of things that you can't with Cloud Atlas is a perfect example. It was a fantastic movie, but people got so confused because it carries so many different storylines it's a perfect example of a feature film that was shot as a film festival project but intended for traditional release, and it flopped because of it, even though it's a fantastic movie.
Interesting. So take me back to when you began. And you had said that you were a ghostwriter, but take me back before that. What did you have your eyes set on? Like, Scott,
well,
we're gonna do this.
I started out as a actor when I was a kid. Did the usual church and school plays, things like that. That's just what you did when I was growing up. All the kids were in them and all that. I was in band, everything else. But when I was 7, I ended up on a cooking show as a guest, as the audience. And then the host actually grabbed me and brought me up as this little kid and started feeding me. So
show.
It was Horst Megger in the Pacific Northwest. It was one of the first cooking shows on TV. Mm-hmm. And we ended up, we went to his restaurant after that all the time. And it was an interesting experience. And then later, after the school stuff and that, I did a few other pieces and that, but it was always a hobby to me. And then when I got out of the military, a friend of the family that happened to be an agent for mass casting and background talent picked me out, and he goes, "Hey, you know what? I've got some featured extra work." And featured extra work ended up becoming paid roles and things
Your
like
Google
this.
Home isn't set up yet. To get started,
Sorry.
download the Google Home app on a phone or tablet.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Thank you, Alexa.
It just randomly talks to me. I'm bored. No, but anyway, so this agent ended up, he was branching out and he started sending me to projects. I'm like, I'm never going to get cast for this thing. And I was getting cast for everything because I was showing up. That's literally, I was in, I don't know, I was in several hundred different projects. I was getting paid for student films. I was getting paid $200 to $300 for a couple hours on a student film. I was, well, all the other extras are sitting around getting pizza and that. I'm sitting with the main talent because I present them a glass of wine and say, would you like anything else with this? And I'm getting paid while I'm like, I didn't even know what the hell I was doing. I literally didn't. And it's what I realized after my traumatic brain injury. I realized that, first of all, that I hated being an actor. I really hated being in front of the camera. I didn't mind being on stage. I don't mind doing interviews, but I hated being, I felt that there are so many better actors out there, people that I want to watch and people that I really respect, that I was taking food out of their mouths. And I actually turned down the prosecuting attorney role in Lincoln Lawyer. Yeah, they called me up and it was funny because I was like, oh, so this casting agent calls me up and she goes, yeah, is this Scott Brown? I'm like, yeah, we'd like you to come down. We have a role for you. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not really acting anymore. No, you don't. This is not an audition. We need you to just come down. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm not acting anymore. She goes, no, you don't. And she started cussing, and a casting agent, when they want you, never cusses. She goes, no, you don't understand. I'm like, whoa, what? She goes, listen, the first person we cast, I'm like, oh, great, I'm not the first. He's in rehab, and we don't think he's going to get back into acting. The second one just took a lead. Oh, great, I'm not even the second. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry. They actually ended up going back and recasting, and Josh Lucas ended up getting the role for across from Matthew McConaughey, and it ended up being his breakout role. And people go, oh, well, don't you regret it and all that? And I'm like, not a bit. I prefer writing and producing. I've directed a few things. Most people prefer me not to direct because I make people actually do their jobs. A lot of times it's yeah, but I prefer the actual writing and producing side of things in that regard. But I was a journalist after I got out of the military and started out as a production assistant, things like that, writing ad copy because the guy that was supposed to do it quit under questionable terms. They said he quit. I think he got fired, but that was my role. And I started writing content for ads. Then next thing you know, I'm writing some small public service announcements, PSAs. Then next thing you know, I'm writing. I was ghostwriting for governors, congressmen, senators, a couple of president-elects. I wrote some articles for them, and I was like, I was getting paid to. They'd give me some bullet points on what they wanted to talk about. I do a little research and write up an article, send it back to them, and they'd approve it. And it was kind of interesting because I wasn't really focused on anything for me. It was never about my name up there or anything. I just wanted to get this story out there and things like that, or do the work. I always enjoyed that process, which was kind of funny because when I was in high school, my English teacher told myself and apparently several others that we'd never be writers.
Oh, wow.
Because she had failed at writing her book. And it took me 10 years to figure out that, oh, crap, I can actually make a living out of this.
Well, she was definitely wrong. So,
well, yeah, it went from ghostwriting for them. And then a friend of mine that was an actor that I'd known from before, one of his associates had a script that he was stuck on. So he asked me to take a look at it. I was like, oh, no big deal. So he sent it out. I fixed a couple little things, sent it back. And about a month later, I just did it as a friendly thing. About a month later, I get an envelope with like $100 bills in it. I'm like, whoa. 25 years ago when that actually was real money.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden I get another script in the mail, and then another script, and I'm getting $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 to fix these guys' scripts with these massive story holes in them. And it wasn't anything complicated, but they were writing to a beat and a format rather than telling a story. And I just went back, and because of my journalistic aspect and production style, I was able to go back and go, okay, well, when you're telling a story, you have to tell it in a series of rational and cohesive thoughts in an order that actually makes sense. Sure. And in journalism, you learn that through AP writing style and all that. And I just applied it to scripts and then expanded it from there. And then about 13, 14 years ago now, I was getting so many requests for writing and I'd met a woman down here in California. So I moved from Oregon down here. And 6 months after getting here, I get randomly attacked and went through traumatic brain injury, lost the ability to speak, read, write, and realized my mortality. And so as I'm doing 6 months of intense therapy just to get basic skills back, I realized, you know what? I have nothing to leave my daughter. So I had no legacy. Mm. So I said, you know what? If my name's not on it, I'm not doing it. So it went from there. And then pretty much I got blacklisted by all the people that I had been writing for because, well, they didn't like the competition. And it was straight competition, even though I had no interest in competing with them on what they were doing. Right. It's also the ghostwriting work kind of dried up on that side. And I was like, fine with that. Because I literally didn't want to do it anymore. But I started getting calls from producers on helping with projects of started fixing some scripts and things like that, and this is what people don't realize about this industry is it's the people you know from the past that might have been working at the restaurant that was trying to become an extra, and you meet them and all of a sudden they become a major star in the industry, and they call you up and, hey, Scott, you still doing this? Or, hey, you doing that? I'll tell you a funny little story. So I know a guy named Jim, and him and I always talked about the ocean or something like that. I didn't even know the guy was in the film industry. This is how little I pay attention to names unless it's applied to a project. So one day I'm over at the Academy of Motion Picture, and we're doing the VES Awards. I was co-producing the VES Awards and doing their live broadcast and that. And all of a sudden I see Jim getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I'm like, what the hell? And I walk out into the lobby where all the catering and that is, and Jim comes out, and everybody had scattered. There had been 50 people there a few minutes before, and all of a sudden there's nobody but him and I. We stand there. I was like, how are you doing? And he goes, oh, I'm doing great, Scott. He goes, how you been doing? I go, oh, just, he goes, what are you doing here? I go, oh, I'm helping co-produce this thing. I go, what have you been up to? He goes, oh, my little project's doing well. Well, I found out his little project was Avatar, and his last name was James Cameron. What's funny is the next time I see him, he's walking out. He's in a just a basic button-down T-shirt. All these guys in suits are like barraging him. He walks out. He sees me. We talk again. Still didn't talk about film. He had just finished his deep ocean dive. We talked about that for a couple minutes. He said, oh, I got to get back to the family. Have a great one. And drove off. And it was like, people go, well, why don't you make a connection there? I'm like, well, I have that connection, but he is in a different caliber of projects and that than what I do, or I'm even really interested in. He does extremely high budget, high concept, pushing the technology in that beyond standard. And I'm in indie film or are working on, small studio projects, things like that, as helping out. Like I did 3 films with Asylum, helping them get their projects going.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked on a lot of projects that I haven't gotten credit for, but like Ocean's Rising, you can catch it on, I think, Netflix still. That was actually on my motor yacht. They didn't even, they're about a week out from production. They didn't have a boat. They didn't have a location. They didn't have, they had 1 location out of 9 that they needed. They didn't have stunt people. They didn't have the boats. They wanted to do an open water scene. They didn't have the permits. They didn't have anything. I'm like, let me take care of it. And that's the side of production I enjoy. But the writing it's always been my passion. So yeah, Ocean's Rising, Sinbad, and can't think of the other one at the moment, but yeah, it was a fast series, and they just forgot to give me credit.
Wow.
And which is funny, because that's not at all unusual in this industry. You'll hear actors, producers, directors, all that getting cut out of credits and everything else. And when I was talking about a legacy before, I realized the only legacy you're going to have is if you actually have some control of the product.
Right.
And the product is the end results. It's not the cast, it's not the crew or anything else. So how do you protect these people? Well, you produce the project yourself. You own your own writing, and you develop it from there.
So now, I read in your intro about your novel to come. And in my mind, only because I get to be comfy in my pajamas with a nice cozy blanket, and I get to open a book and read a wonderful novel. And my brain goes, well, when did you decide to kind of calm it all down and write a novel? But that can't be calming it down. Like, that's going to be so much more content. That's the reverse, right?
Well, let me put it this way. The average 90-page screenplay is about 30,000 words. Okay. Now, people can say, oh, this is bullshit and all that. But I hammered out Terminal, which was 96 pages. And I did it in 24 hours.
Okay.
I outlined it, wrote it, and delivered it to the Sony in 24 hours. This was included when a friend of mine that had made the connection came over to help me write it. And he wouldn't shut the hell up, so I took him out and got him drunk so that I could sit down and actually write the thing. I did switch the glasses. I had 1 glass. He had 2.5 pitchers. And when he woke up, he's like, "Oh my God, we need to get this thing, started." I'm like, "I'm done." But it helps to type 126 words a minute, also.
Yes.
But I teach people. One of the things I do is I teach people how to be able to do that, and it's not about the speed in which you type, but how much prep work you do in your initial outline. And I teach a very simple, clean, eloquent way to do that through mind mapping and things like that, and then using that to go into final draft and finalize the script. You don't go in and start writing your script. That's a great way to get lost and just start and end up with something you're going to have to rewrite 50 or 100 times. Whereas if you do your outline properly, and when you do your outline in a proper format, and I don't mean, oh, you have to do this beat here. There's a book called Save the Cat. Worst book ever for a writer out there. Absolute worst book. It has destroyed so many writers because they think they have to write to a beat. They think they have to have this on this page, this on this page, this on this page, and this on this page. That's not even close to true. You have to tell the story. Everybody forgets that as a writer, except for people in the novel business. Screenwriters forget it all the time. They put in the action, they put in scenes, but they don't tell the story. And these high budget films, when you get it down to it, a lot of the Marvel stuff is there's no story there. There's no actual story. They show all this action and everything else, but the story is missing. And I like to look at a project like oh my God, my brain just went blank. Deadpool is a good example of one that actually had a story,
right?
And then made and knew that, okay, if we take it so seriously, it's going to be bad. So they made fun of their own story, and that's why it was a hit, because it was actually a good storyline, but it was just so sad and upsetting. So they made a spectacle of it, but they carried the story throughout, and that's what made it. And they threw pocket change in comparison at that, compared to all the other ones that they were doing these amazing special effects, but the story sucked.
Yeah.
But if you look at Deadpool, there's actually a good story there, and trauma and redemption and everything else, and it's not the epitome of a hero, but an anti-hero in his own right, and plus a satirical look at it. So, but
I love that you said that. I'm sorry. I love that you made that point, because there are so many conversations between, gosh, not even just me and my husband, but so many other men that I've sat down to watch a movie, and let's say it's his pick, and we're sitting there watching, I'm not going to name any names, but some just action movie, okay? Mm-hmm. And I fall asleep. And they'll say, well, why did you fall asleep? And I'm like, what's the story? Oh, there is no story. Did you see how fast they were going? And I'm like, I don't get it. If there's no story, I can't do it.
Exactly. But there are some great ones. Do you remember the movie Cocoon?
Yes.
On Golden Pond,
mm-hmm.
Bridges of Madison County. These type of movies, everybody goes, okay, well, that's drama. Well, then you have Clint Eastwood's movies. Mm-hmm. If those aren't dramas, I don't know what is, but it's definitely dark action also. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that studios go, okay, well, this sold, so we're going to make more of these. And so writers write this crap and it's, you know what I feel like? It's, and no disrespect to the Harlequin romance writers, because I know several of them, they're very hard writers and that, but they get into a pattern that they know they have to follow. So they write based upon the readership of their audience, and it's pretty much retelling the same story. Hallmark is a perfect example of an entire channel built around it, especially around the holidays. You put the three characters in, boom, 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 and it's, it's the woman that breaks down in the small town, the handsome garage owner, and the dog. You get the dog in there, it's a guaranteed sell to Hallmark kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's a cute story. It's shown in different lights, but it's told and it's retold and it's retold and it's retold and it's retold. And they think that that's because it's being watched. They think that's what the viewer wants, mm-hmm. But they haven't given the viewer anything else to look at, because it's a saturated market. So that's where all the views go, because that's the only thing on. And it's the grade of disappointment has slid. It went from, okay, it used to be a scale of 1 to 100. And it's like, okay, I love that movie. It was an absolute number one. Or that was the worst movie I've seen. It was 100. Mm-hmm. Now it's a scale of 1 to 10. And everything is, okay, towards that 1 to 10 side. Well, hold it. What happened to the rest of the scale? We're just ignoring it. it's still there, but we're ignoring it. And that's why it's such an amazing time actually for independent film in that, because independent filmmakers can actually produce micro budget projects. Like perfect example is Two Dudes on a Couch. It was a collection of sizzle reels for us. And my partner at the time, my business partner at the time, I was telling him, okay, we need to shoot our sizzle reels. And he went off and he was like, oh, let's go. And he was testing out camera equipment. We did this, and he did these series of just goofball, Monty Python-esque vignettes. Well, then I'm looking at it going, oh my God. I go, okay, where are the ones you were supposed to have shot? And he goes, oh, I did these instead. I'm like, oh my God. We have nothing. And so I looked at him. I'm like, okay, hold it. So I wrote a script around these vignettes about two guys pitching the idea of films to each other, these outlandish films to each other. And it's called Two Dudes on a Couch. Think of it as, and then what's funny is after we did that one,
I think I found Two Dudes on a Couch.
Movie 43 or movie 54 came out, which is it's similar, but it was a very high budget version. But we shot ours. I tell people less than 20 grand, but in reality, it was less than $2,000.
So Two Dudes on a Couch. Does it start sort of like with the Star Wars?
Yep, that would be it.
Okay, can I show a few minutes of it?
I think there's a sizzle reel of it out there.
Is there? I think this is the first episode.
Well, yeah. Well, it's we did some clips, but we actually, that would be it.
Episode 1.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a good minute time frame that you know of? That
on that particular one, it's a free for all.
All right, let's watch a couple of minutes of it. This is Two Dudes on a Couch.
Two dudes on the couch,
Oh, hold it. Sorry. This is not ours.
Oh. We'll have to find that sizzle reel.
That actually, I believe it or not, I believe that was one of our fan produced ones.
Oh, you're kidding.
We actually had a weird little following, and some people were doing spoofs of our spoof. And I believe that was one of them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But yeah, it's there was a whole, but we took this series of vignettes, we made a feature-length film from it, and it was quite amusing. Had a lot of different talent in it, a lot of social media stars, a lot of well-known actors and that from TV and that. So a lot of B and C list actors, which if you're trying to cast up a project, there's a lot of serious B and C list actors that have been overlooked or have been fallen out of the limelight that are more into than willing to work on projects, even indie film, non-SAG, especially if you give them points on the project as well as a reasonable day rate. And a reasonable day rate depends on the budget of the film. Honestly, it's not, you're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're talking, you can honestly, if you shoot quality with like a Black Magic or something, you can shoot a reasonable locked location feature film for $10,000 or $20,000 and get distribution.
Really? Oh, that's not bad.
It's a common misconception that you need a couple of $100,000 to do it. I've gotten through Maxit Magazine, we actually helped several people get distribution in that on micro budget films, and that. But
now tell me a little bit more about Maxit Magazine.
Well, Maxit was a passion project of mine. I saw that that studios were locking indie film out, and that IMDb wasn't letting people even list indie films on IMDb.
Okay.
Without being already attached to a studio. And people say, oh, it's like, people call Searchlight an indie production studio. Any of those are, it's Fox Searchlight. If you have Fox in your name, you're not studio. Asylum is a perfect example of a indie film production group that built to they made the Sharknado and all that, but they do these micro budget projects at budgets about 100 to 200,000 kind of thing, and they've made millions on these projects because but they built it up as a true indie studio and fought to get there. There's a lot of other indie filmmakers that I've worked with that they have projects sitting in the closet. There's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of non-distributed movies, TV shows, everything else, pilots that have never gotten distribution that are just sitting in closets. And because they couldn't get them listed, they couldn't get attention on them and things like that. And I owned a newspaper way back when, the same newspaper I started as a production assistant. 5 years later, I ended up buying it. And made it the fastest growing weekly in the news in the US, actually.
Oh, wow.
And using that same positive technique, I took Maxit, developed this website, and started pushing it out to the people I knew in the industry. And we got listed in Google, we got listed, and then I made a couple of calls to people I knew and pushed a couple of people that owed me favors to list a couple of the projects that were listed, small, tiny, little known sizzle reel development projects onto IMDb as in development. Those projects ended up getting distribution, getting picked up by studios, things like that. And then IMDb realized, once they had a few coming from us, they realized, holy crap, these are actually, because it was hard news source. It was, you had to put in all this information, you had to attach who was attached. It couldn't just be an idea you came up with. You had to actually have something to show me that you were actually serious about this. Once that was done, and with my credibility in IMDb at the time, I think I was in the top 0.25% of IMDb. I think it was like, I don't know, 20,000 or something like that. And I started helping people list projects. And then I told them, okay. And then I started showing people how to post onto Maxit, submit it, get fact checked, get reviewed, edited, posted. And then from there, they could list the actual article as the reference to IMDb for a requirement to actually go live on IMDb. So we ended up getting people funded, distribution, helped a lot of crowdfunding projects, get attention, gain funding, get distribution, get marketing, and expanded from there.
Oh, that's very interesting. Wow. Wow. That's fantastic help for the people that needed it at the time to be able to get, offer IMDb credit. I mean,
what was funny was I would go to these meetings and tell people, and I'd listen to them week after week complain that they couldn't get their project on an IMDb. They couldn't get any attention. I'd tell them, okay, submit a press release.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, here's the information. I'm like, no, you take the time to submit a press release. And I even had an article on how to write a proper press release. We're not talking pages and pages. I'm talking a standard basic press release.
Sure.
3 to 5 paragraphs, how to present it, blah, blah, blah. They wouldn't even do that. They would not even do that. I was getting hundreds of listings a week, but these people, there were thousands out there that wouldn't even, they'd sit and whine and bitch about not being able to get distribution, not being able to get attention on their project and things like that. But they wouldn't do the very basic necessity that that you have to do to drive a project forward. That's why I've been very successful at what I do, because I have no shame in talking about a project. I have no shame about writing the articles and submitting them. I have no shame about putting a database together of every newspaper. Doesn't matter. Here's the thing. Doesn't matter what newspaper it is. Every newspaper in the US together, and broadcasting out a press release on a little studio film, or a indie studio film, and someone that actually lived in that town at some point, hometown girl makes good, and then that is usable for IMDb listing. But it's people just don't do it. They are not willing. They want to be in the industry, but they don't want to do the work. And that's what it's. They talk about being blacklisted. I know what blacklisting is. I am blacklisted as a writer for a lot of studios by a lot of the writers that I wrote for. But it's no such thing as true blacklisting. It's laziness, because even blacklisted, I was still selling projects, and I sold a lot of projects.
Well, one of the projects that we talked about earlier was Temecula Uncorked. Can you tell us a little bit about that documentary? I'm assuming it's in post-production?
It's in post-production, yes. We are actually in discussion with our initial release is set to be at potentially Miramonte Winery for their VIP members. And then we actually have several other wineries that are interested in releasing to their VIP members first before we do a public release. So we've cut the movie 3 times so far to pitch and present to get to this point. Now we're actually cutting the entire film. What it does is it starts back in the original history of Temecula wine country, which a lot of people don't realize is one of the oldest wine growing regions in all of California.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's older than Napa. But Napa is more publicized, more presented, things like that. But the history of grapes in Temecula goes, well, we're talking a couple hundred years before Napa even thought about wine. And it goes through the process of the health of the community, how it's developing, about the struggles it faces, about the fantastic wines. And trust me, Napa is it's got nothing on Temecula. Paso Robles, those two can compete, but Napa's wines are pathetic compared to Temecula. And
I'm sorry.
I didn't even know Temecula existed until I went down there, and then I tried the wine, and then the documentary came about. And we had a lot of great support by the wineries and that, and they opened their doors to us. They opened their barrel rooms to us and everything else. So it was pretty awesome.
Oh, wow. Now, yeah. I had read that they're going through a 10-year plus severe drought.
Well, it's what's interesting about the drought is I'm actually in Riverside, and just in my area, we've, until this last rainstorm, we had less than 4 inches of rain since July of 2021. Or 2020, sorry, July of 2020. 4 inches. Yeah, so with the almond growers and things like that, they're just wasting massive amounts of water that actually have stolen pretty much most water rights in California. They have been dehydrating every other region of agricultural growing, including Temecula. And Temecula is been very creative in how they're overcoming those challenges. And it's just a lot of the sustainability practices in that are pretty impressive. And I think that's honestly, I think that's why they have a better wine, because they don't have the access to the water. So they're coming up with these much more natural and sustainable ways to produce a better quality of product.
And that story is told within the documentary. Is that right?
A good portion of it is, yes. Plus also we're looking at a TV show around this as well.
Okay. So. There's one other project I want to ask you about. Z.I.R. Zombies in Recovery.
Everybody does a zombie show. There's so many zombie, Walking Dead, everything else. But what happens after the zombie apocalypse? What happens when we find the cure? What happens to all the zombies?
I don't know. I guess the only thing I know is that they just feast like locusts until.
And this story tells the difference between the various stages of zombieism, just like any disease, and reintroducing these productive members of society back into society. So it's shot in a documentary style, along the lines of The Office, and it tells about the therapist that started this program and his challenges that he faces as he's introducing all these various zombies, taking them from the containment camps and reintroducing them into society one at a time. So
how hysterical is that?
It starts out with a nice little roundtable therapy session, and then some of the challenges that he faces is, the emergency calls he gets from a zombie here and there, having issues about relationships, all these zombies are. What it is all these zombies are blaming their zombieism for their issues, but in reality, these are the same issues they had as normal people. They're just using zombieism, just like everybody does, to blame for their issues. So their issues are actually themselves, but they're just not willing to face them yet. So we're actually in discussion with an amazing talent that I worked with. He was in Two Dudes on a Couch, and so we're in discussion. And he's actually what's hilarious is since the lockdown, he's actually getting his degree in psychology and counseling. So it's a perfect match because he's one of the funniest guys I've ever come across. So, but I'm not announcing who or anything at that point. But we have a lot of actual B and C list talent that are very interested. We have several that have said, "Hey, let me know when we're moving forward." Ken, I couldn't agree more. We are all basically walking zombies. And yeah, the last 3 years is a perfect example. But no, it's great because when you tell a story and then have these actors go, "Hey, you know what, Scott? Hey, what's going on with this project?" Or, "Hey, what's going on with that project?" And they could pick from other projects, but it's nice to have these people that you used to watch on TV come in and ask you for an opportunity to appear in one of your projects, and go, "Hey, you know what? Just put me in it. This just looks like fun." And it's like, that's what I want. I do a lot of my first novel is based upon my screenplay, Terminal, which is an assassin hires the terminally ill to carry out his hits. So, and we can talk about the novel aspect in a minute, but but they've always liked my writing in that, and a lot of them have read that, and they were like, "Scott, if you write that well, I want to be in Zombies in Recovery. I've got to be in it." It's like, okay, we'll look at that. So we're hoping to shoot the sizzle reel this spring in Texas. And I prefer to shoot on location. I don't believe in studio stuff and that unless you're there's a lot of times where you have to be in studio, but I don't shoot in LA. There's too many chokeholds when there's so many different production areas: Austin, Atlanta, Chicago. Hell, go to New York, shoot downtown. They'll give you a permit every day of the week to shoot on the street without half the issues that you'll face with LA and everything else. And we're going to be shooting the sizzle reel, and then the process that I use is I shoot a sizzle reel and then I pitch it usually to a distributor. We used to have before COVID, we had a pipeline distribution deal. So pretty much anything I was attached to automatically got distribution. But they ended up getting picked up when COVID happened, and then froze out pretty much. They ended up their whole film library was locked up at that point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we won't say which streaming service because it's still in discussion on whether anything is going to get released. So, but yeah, a lot of the big streaming services did that to some of the smaller acquisition companies. So that they could just feed them the studio projects and lock out the indie film. That's the disgusting thing that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that's a lot of work just sitting in the can. Like, that's money and work and time. And
I can introduce you to thousands of filmmakers that have projects sitting in the cans.
Jeez.
Nashville's another great shooting area. Yes, Ken.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, Scott. Well, tell everybody where they can contact you or find you.
You can catch me on Twitter or Instagram at Pushing the Pin. My website, pushingthepin.com, will be back up. It's getting a redevelopment right now, so by the end of the month, hopefully. I'm looking at the comments here. Ken just said he's a SAG prostitute. Yes, there's a lot of SAG whores out there, and I have a lot of SAG card holders that have worked on my indie film projects, because the workaround is if the SAG owner, or if the SAG actor owns a piece of the project, then they don't have to do the SAG points. Because they own a piece of the project. It's a personal project. That's a workaround. So give shares, give points, give real points. Let them actually be involved. Give your cast and crew points in your projects, and you'll get a hell of a lot more attention on it, because every one of them, instead of just working on the project and getting out for the payday, they'll all talk about it. They'll share it on social media. And just like Max, it'll get the drive, and it'll get distribution, it'll get attention.
So before I let you go, I just have to ask this question. Do you have like a mentorship program where you can...
I've mentored a lot of people. I still do mentor on occasion. It's selective. I look for people that are looking to really advance what they're doing. I'm not looking for necessarily people that are just breaking into the business. They need to get out there and actually work on sets and things like that beforehand. If you're a writer, go out and do some extra work. Volunteer on an indie film, things like that. Forget about film schools unless you're going to like Chapman or something. Then, because that's a guaranteed into a major position. But if you're the average person and you want to get in the film business, work on sets, volunteer. It's the cheapest form of schooling you'll get. You'll get hands-on, you'll get credits. People will refer you to other work if you do good. And then from there, then come and talk to me if you want to expand into writing or producing or directing.
Yeah,
and I have a hardcore, I don't play nice. My friends say I'm the nicest asshole you'll ever meet. Because I don't pull punches. I will tell you what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, but it's take it as I just want you to succeed in this industry.
Yeah.
So I'll teach you how to write a script in a weekend that'll sell.
That's amazing. Well, Scott, thank you so much for the time that you've had for us this evening. This has been a great conversation. I love every project, and you just absolutely crack me up. So thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you for having me, Elizabeth.
You're very welcome. I'll see you next time, all right?
Sounds good.
All right. Everybody, thank you so much for staying tuned in. I absolutely love all of you, and every single one of the eyeballs that comes my way are always welcome. Everybody, we are blessed. You are blessed. And I love you. I'll see you next time. Scott, that was fantastic.